Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I'm very pleased to speak and to express my thanks to the members who have contributed to the debate on the Enhancing Online Safety for Children Bill 2014 and the Enhancing Online Safety for Children Consequential Amendments Bill 2014. And I am particularly pleased that these bills have received support from the opposition and from members who have spoken from the opposition, as well as from members on this side of the House. Mr Deputy Speaker, the importance of keeping Australian children safe on the internet is above politics, and it can sometimes be the case that members in this House are subject to criticism in the community, often justified criticism, about playing politics on a range of issues. But I think the debate that we've had on this very important topic is an example of this House working at its best to reflect and to respond to community concern, and to do that in a constructive and bipartisan spirit, reflecting the importance that every member of this House attaches to the objective of keeping Australian children as safe as possible when they are using the internet. I want to thank the Shadow Assistant Minister for Communications, who has taken the lead on this issue on behalf of the opposition, the member for Greenway, and I want to put on record my appreciation of the constructive way in which she has engaged in relation to the detail of this bill, as indeed has the Shadow Minister for Communications, the member for Blaxland. In the debate on this bill, we have heard some outstanding contributions from members on both sides of the House. We've heard a number of members share stories about their own personal experience in relation to this very important topic. Some have spoken in their capacity as parents. Some have spoken in their capacity as former teachers. Some have spoken in their capacity of members of Parliament, having dealt with these issues facing children and parents in their electorate. Many of them have spoken about the discussions that they've had with principals, with teachers, with parents and children in their electorates, and I think the breadth of commentary that we've heard is an indicator of the extent of this issue in the Australian community today. I do want to thank every member who's made a contribution in a debate which I think has been of a very high standard. I also at this time, Mr Deputy Speaker, want to express my thanks to a number of people around Australia, parents, siblings or family members of teenagers who tragically have committed suicide or otherwise been lost as a result of dangers that they have been exposed to online. I'm not going to mention names because in some cases I have been told some intensely personal stories, Mr Deputy Speaker, but I do want to acknowledge the courage of a number of people who have taken the time to speak to me about the loss that their family has suffered and to share with me some very difficult stories of the bullying that their lost family member was exposed to. Mr Deputy Speaker, it is a statement of the obvious that today's children are better informed, better able to express their creativity and better with technology than any previous generation. The internet is a central part of the lives of today's children. It will be a central part of their lives as adults as well. And children are drawn to the internet for the same reason as adults. It's a means to be informed, to be educated, to be entertained, to express your own ideas and creativity, and most fundamentally, to satisfy the deep-seated human need to interact with other human beings. But, Mr Deputy Speaker, just as with human interactions in any other context, while the majority of interactions online are positive, a minority go wrong. And when that happens, the internet and social media in particular can make bullying behaviour more dangerous to children who are the victims of it. On the 3rd of December, the government introduced these bills into the parliament to implement the coalition's election commitment to enhance online safety for children. The bills were developed following substantial public and stakeholder consultation, including consideration of over 80 submissions received in response to the public discussion paper released in January 2014. Research commissioned by the government and led by the University of New South Wales and involving a consortium of universities was undertaken, and the results of that research confirmed the messages that politicians have been receiving from the community regarding the prevalence and impact of cyberbullying on Australian children. Following that public consultation process, the government has continued to engage with key stakeholders, including members of the government's Online Safety Consultative Working Group, and I want to thank all of those members, industry representatives, community representatives, representatives of many excellent non-government organisations doing wonderful work in this space. I want to thank all of them for their contribution. The bills that are before the House this evening were referred to the Senate Environment and Communications Legislation Committee for inquiry and report, and that report is due by the 3rd of March, and there were 29 submissions received by that committee. I'd also like to express my thanks to all the organisations that contributed to that inquiry. I do note that a number of submissions made the point that, in their view, the eligibility criteria for the appointment of the Commissioner should include experience in or knowledge of child welfare or well-being. I want to state that I understand the emphasis that stakeholders have attached to this particular criterion. I also want to note that there's an inherent danger in setting out in the legislation an exhaustive list of criteria together with a requirement that every one of those criteria must be met, because it would necessarily become extremely difficult to find somebody who meets every criterion on a long list. There are clearly a range of factors that would be positive for a person in the Commissioner's role, and what is in the draft bill are the criteria which, in the government's view, are the critical success factors, particularly that the Commissioner needs to be a person with a deep understanding of the internet and how it is used. That being said, Mr Deputy Speaker, I do want to acknowledge that to have experience in relation to child welfare matters would certainly be a plus for any candidate for the role of the Children's E-Safety Commissioner, although in my view it should not be a mandatory criterion. Mr Deputy Speaker, the public policy process undertaken to date demonstrates in part that the government does not believe that keeping children safe online is exclusively or even largely a job for government. There's a collective responsibility to keep our children safe online, and in that regard I'd like to acknowledge the constructive engagement I've had with the local management teams of a number of the large social media services, including Google, Facebook, Twitter, Microsoft and Yahoo 7. I also want to note the recent statements made by the global CEO of Twitter, Dick Costolo, who said in a company memo in quite blunt language, quotes, "We suck at dealing with abuse and trolls on the platform, and we've sucked at it for years," close quotes. Colourful language, but a very significant statement from Twitter, acknowledging that that company believes that it needs to do more to combat abuse, trolling and cyberbullying on its platform. And I see this as a welcome recognition of growing, a welcome example, I should say, of growing recognition by social media platforms of the nature of the social responsibility that attaches to the power that these platforms have. And I hope we'll see more of that, not least because if the social media platforms take the lead in offering their users a safe environment in which to interact, that will minimise any need for government intervention. And I do want to acknowledge that the social media services have put additional resources into these issues over recent years. A number of members in the debate did refer to this significant statement from Twitter. A number of members also referred to some very significant child online safety initiatives launched recently in Australia. For example, the eSmart Digital Licence, which is a partnership between the Alana and Madeline Foundation and Google, a licence designed to educate and empower children. Another recent initiative is the Thread app from the Carly Ryan Foundation, helping children and young adults to check in with their loved ones to stay connected and keep safe. And I've been very pleased in recent weeks to attend the launch of both of these important online safety initiatives. Of course, as part of this government's commitment to online safety for children, we are providing funding of $7.5 million for schools to access online safety programs of the kind delivered by organisations like the Alana and Madeline Foundation and the Carly Ryan Foundation. Let me touch on the specific measures in the bills. The bill will establish the Children's E-Safety Commissioner as an independent statutory office within the Australian Communications and Media Authority to take a national leadership role in online safety for children. The Commissioner will administer a complaint system for cyberbullying material targeted at an Australian child, along with promoting online safety for children and coordinating relevant activities of Commonwealth departments, authorities and agencies in relation to online safety for children. The Commissioner will also accredit and evaluate online safety educational programs, along with taking responsibility for administering the existing online content scheme. The bill sets out a two-tiered scheme for the rapid removal from large social media services of cyberbullying material targeted at an Australian child. Social media services participating under Tier 1 will do so on a cooperative basis. That is, the service will apply to participate, and on acceptance of its application, it will be included as a Tier 1 site. The Commissioner will have the power to revoke Tier 1 status if the service repeatedly fails to remove cyberbullying material following requests from the Commissioner over a 12-month period. The service may also be declared Tier 2 at its own request. Those services which are declared to be Tier 2 sites will be subject to legally binding notices or face the risk of civil penalties for non-compliance. The two-tiered scheme allows for a light-touch regulatory approach in circumstances where the social media service has an effective complaints scheme that is working well. But it enables the government to require that cyberbullying material targeted at an Australian child be removed in circumstances where a social media service does not have an effective and well-resourced complaints scheme. The bill gives the Commissioner the power to issue an end-user notice to a person who posts cyberbullying material targeted at an Australian child. An end-user notice may require the recipient of the notice to take all reasonable steps to remove the material, refrain from posting further material targeted at the child, or apologise for posting the material. And if the recipient of the notice fails to respond, the Commissioner may seek an injunction or refer the matter to the police. Mr Deputy Speaker, the measures in these bills implement key aspects of the government's election commitment to enhance online safety for Australian children. The measures will bring a better and more rapid response to bullying behaviours targeted at Australian children, and in turn will help to keep Australian children safer online. I thank everybody who has contributed to this policy process, and I look forward to continued engagement with all relevant stakeholders as we move to taking this bill to the other place and, in due course, provided it passes there, to the implementation of the measures contained in this bill.